What happened with Elizabeth was, in the beginning, she really did have her mind totally focused on getting Baba here, so she was not as sociable and loving as Norina and well, Nadine was so loving to me, you know. And so I had to get used to Elizabeth, who was very impersonal.
Right.
But then what happened, and everyone knew that. It wasn't as if I shouldn't have taken it personally. But what also happened with Elizabeth was that when Jane and the children came into her life,
changed tremendously for her, probably because
she had a real karma.
Gave her a family all of a sudden.
No, I mean, she just
isn't it amazing how Baba planned that for her? I mean, she on her own, she wouldn't have probably volunteered to go into that, but with Baba's push, all of a sudden it just opened up a whole other vista for her life.
It really did. And, of course, I met her when she was divorced from Mr. Patterson, or maybe in the process, and they were good friends. He'd come and see her. And Kitty once said to me, such different types, all these women were so utterly different. Right. Kitty said, you know, I never had the slightest feeling for, you know, a relationship, you know.
Really? Isn't that interesting?
Attraction to him for that purpose. For physical, of course she's extremely loving of her fellow human beings, but like she was explaining the feeling of sex, you know. As when I got married, I said, don't you think sex is terribly overrated, Kitty? And she said, you know, I never felt any need for that at all. This was all in 1952, after 9 years of waiting. And actually, one of the nice things was that in living with these women, Norina, Elizabeth, Nadine, Baba had directed them to place Phyllis and myself on the Welcome Committee, named the Universal Spiritual League, I believe it was, which was a chartered organization established primarily to bring Baba over. And we were designated as members of that. It was a small group. I think Phyllis and myself, Margaret Crask by that time had arrived from England.
That must have been exciting. Had a good feeling.
Very, it really was such a privilege meeting all the people that really were those early Western disciples through whom Baba did so much work. One time, as you know, Baba said, my work in the West will be done by a lot of women, too. Among those early women, then, I, in addition to the three with whom we lived for a few years, were Margaret Crask, who came and over later. He was very keen to re-enter her own arena, which was the dance world. She was very just so I would say selfless in her manner of coming as a guest to Elizabeth's home at the time when Norina was not well, and selfless in the sense that when she met Phyllis and myself, she felt that we should just benefit from her knowledge of dancing, and not being dancers at all, neither Phyllis nor myself. She invited us up to the upper spare room to do these exercises every day. And I still recall and still try to do some of them. And altogether she just made a place for herself in the household, and at times helped in the care of Norina, just as I did pretty regularly. And throughout the years in that home in New York, the men mandali that visited were Naraman Dadachanji, Meherji. We met him ahead of time. I mean, before he came with the entourage in 1952. So it was in the late 40s that they would come on business trips. They both were, as you know, tremendous supporters of Baba's work. So that I had my chance to meet what should be the ideal for all Westerners who were part of the technological and capitalistic civilization. It was my wonderful opportunity to meet very honest businessmen.
Me too.
And others that did come at that time were Dr. Donkin. Dr. Donkin was sent on a couple of special missions. One was when there was a plight of poverty in India. I don't know what was due to a famine situation or what, but somehow his visit here did coincide with the world situation to the extent that when he came, he was given an order from Baba to collect some money from Baba lovers for Feeding the Poor program, a Feeding the Poor program. And after this mission was accomplished, the reverberation seemed to be in India that the United States, who up to that time had not given them any kind of funding, now did supply them with, just enormous funds.
Sowed the seed.
And there seemed to be a sort of, reverberation of the kind of mission which preceded it in Dr. Donkin's coming. Many times, according to some of the women disciples, there were situations of that kind where Baba's work with them would be reflected and echoed in a more universal way. Specific things. Of course, we know that not a leaf falls except by the divine will, and that everything has its repercussions in the world that Baba does. But there are many instances reported by individuals which make it so very interesting. I have in mind instances that Margaret Crash reported, where just some specific journey that she had to make somewhere had its wider implications later on. That was a period. I was just describing some of my experiences with meeting some of these outstanding disciples while living in the home on Gramercy Park. And it was from that home that Baba in 1940, I believe it was around 47, 48, invited Elizabeth and Norina to come back. And this still was prior to the opening of the Meher Center. and still work was being accomplished. And during those intervals, generally speaking, during that interval, I moved back to my home, and Phyllis moved back to her home. In this time, when I moved back to my home, I didn't exactly move to my home because I did get a position in an East Side settlement, in a Brooklyn settlement house, with a lady whose initials were MB. That persuaded me it was the right place to work. But interestingly enough, it was. Her name was Mary Birch. She was considered the mother of the neighborhood for over 20 years. She had been the directress of the settlement house, and it is a historic interest. A novel was written about this settlement house called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And Mary Birch had adopted, she herself was a single lady in her late 60s when she hired me to be her Girl Friday, as it were, secretary, assistant teacher, just about anything that she couldn't do since some of the signs of old age were creeping up on her. And she had adopted a couple of very interesting children in this rundown ghetto district of Italian, Irish, Polish in Brooklyn. One of them were two children who came from a family where the father had murdered the mother, and she had sent them to a very good school to the extent that they became professionals. And I don't remember. I was very impressed with the upbringing of these two boys under Mary's care. And I met them eventually. And it was while I was at this school that I had such fulfillment in working again with children. I think ever since I had my first job, it had to do with children. And there was one particular little child, her name was Beatrice Courtcamp, that I took a very real interest in. And while corresponding with Norina, who was in India at the time, I enclosed a picture which included little Beatrice Courtcamp and another child, and in fact it was a group picture of those children who came to the settlement house, and a group picture was made of them by a professional at one time. It was Miss Birch's way of providing a kind of a yearbook for them. And I sent that to India, and the response I got, I hope I still have that letter, was, when I received your letter, Norina Machiavelli wrote, interestingly enough, Baba had come into the room. And she said Baba had with him a little magnifying glass. And she said, he said he'd like to look at that picture because it was a large group picture and the faces were too diminutive really to distinguish the features and all just with the naked eye. So he looked at it carefully and had a very important request for you, Adele. And so, not having the picture myself that I had sent to her, nevertheless I had a copy from the settlement house, and Baba pointed out 3 children, the first row, the third child to the left, the fourth row, the child to the right. 3 children were pointed out of a group of at least 80. at least 80. And he said that those children deserve special attention. So ever after, I gave particularly 2 of them special attention. The boy was there in my mind too, but he was so independent and not as accessible to another girl, and so I had him in mind. I'll conclude the story with something about him. But I still have that picture. I still have a copy of that picture, I think, somewhere. I think I got an extra one from Mary Burge. And little Beatrice was a child in a family of Polish parents who were rather, overburdened. I think her mother did her best. I remember when I would visit their home many times, I'd go there. The mother would never sit down. She was always eating standing up or doing a wash load, or I never saw that lady sit down. So one sister had become a really loose young woman. Beatrice at that time was about 10, I would say. Her sister was more like 15, and she was terribly involved with a set of with some kind of attitude which was, I just couldn't reach her at all. But I wasn't concerned about that, since it was Beatrice that Baba had asked me to take a special interest in. And the interest was greatly helped by the Shaws on occasional summer vacations. We both went up to Schenectady, and they asked little BB to stay there. We called her BB, and she stayed there for vacation time. Monty sent her 2 little dolls, which were very precious. And when Baba came in 1952, in the home of Ivy Deuce after the accident, Beatrice came and met him, and so did her brother. And the other girl, she didn't come from as impoverished a home as BB. So, but I did have a lot of just interaction with her and saw her as much as possible. And the boy this boy was the boy that I had invited to come and meet Baba, who had asked us to find the appropriate person to help him. He was looking for a boy to be his, sort of helper, nurse during his convalescence. And this boy was very responsive. He was very happy to go. But Baba was very happy to meet him, and when Baba talked to him, he said, "You don't have to pay me. I'll work for you anyway." Oh. This young boy said that. Imagine. Came from Italian. Most of these children that I worked with were of Italian, Polish background. But he was Italian, and very nice that he said that, because he saw Baba with. He had his limbs, in a cast, and he really looked pitiful. And you know how Baba plays the role. He probably played the role of a poor old man or something. So this boy said, "Well, I'll take care of you. You don't have to pay me." However, it was not his destiny this time, except he was very fortunate to meet Baba. Baba said he's not. Baba explained it to me. He always gives a reason. Very nice, but too weak, too small, too weak, not strong enough. As you know the story, Phyllis's nephew was just right, apparently. And so that that was one outcome of the interval of time when we moved away from the three women disciples on our own. And I think the important thing when I came to Baba was that Baba consolidated the energy that one uses in adapting to the world for his purpose. That was such grace, because it was in coming into Baba's fold, so to speak, that I had direction in terms of what to do with money. Because prior to then, I had no upbringing in terms of the place of money, which is really very important, to give it its proper place, and for whatever reasons you want to earn it, and which of course is an outcome of blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, why? It simplified my life in that respect. Personally, I still had so much to learn about budgeting and really understanding the overall meaning of money. I still don't know what it is to this day. I mean, how our whole economic system just baffles me enormously. Nevertheless, what Baba gives us is a real simplification of life if we don't accept it. It just makes everything necessary for the sake of love, and everything's for the sake of love. So it really is somehow just so strange that we have these entangled sanskars that keep tripping us up and keep always they're just I think if we could just at every moment know what we have experienced as that experience that Baba gives of love, and that is induplicable in any other way, and just if we could somehow just remain convinced without any kind of experimentation with anything else, that we would really overcome the worry and to just enjoy the play, and just as he does, enjoy the lahar.
Now, in between...
Do you ever stop that?
No, it was all right. I was just going to say, in between all this time, so Phyllis was at her home and you were working...
Yes, in Brooklyn. I lived there. Well, it was actually... I was totally living there and devoted to this lady. I grew very fond of Mary Birch.
Right.
Mary Birch ultimately did learn about Meher Baba. She was further befriended by other Baba lovers. I was particularly happy about her friendship with Kim Tolhurst. Kim Tolhurst was the English disciple that came from England to study voice, and had with the Metropolitan Opera, and she was part of Kimco.
Right.
And also for a period of time we met in her home. And in one way or another, I don't remember how, but Kim and Mary Birch had a real rapport and a very good relationship. And Mary came and met my mother, and she was a very real, I would say, a gratification to me, because there's a woman who had done so much good in her life, and I would have been just terribly disappointed if someone like Mary wouldn't recognize Baba.
Yeah. She's kind of a role model.
Yes. She had worked with, she herself was a real old generation America. She probably, I think Mary was partly English, and she had nevertheless taken to her heart people of every nationality, and just through her life's work, Baba made her recognize the universality of the true teaching. Whether she didn't call herself any one religion, she really was truly just. It was certainly her destiny to hear about Baba.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a very wonderful period of my life. Also, I've had, the highlight, I would say, was when we were invited to live with the 3 women disciples. That was a very great highlight, because Baba's love was so potent then. Just very powerful. It really...
That was pretty much your honeymoon period.
Yeah, very much so. And nevertheless, so Baba supplied something through this settlement house work, which wouldn't have been too much of a letdown.
Right.
Yes. And then...
Did Kimco come into existence during that period of time when Baba was writing letters?
Kimco was in the 30s.
In the 30s? Oh, that goes way back then.
She met Baba when he first came.
Oh.
The stories about Kimco are interesting, because she was very devoted to Jesus Christ, and a little bit like Kitty, in the respect that before the replacement I would say more or less the integration and the synthesis of Baba Jesus into Baba took place, several amusing episodes happened, such as the one described in Kitty's book or in Mr. Purdham's book, where after meeting Baba in the early years, on one occasion there was perhaps an incident which she couldn't comprehend, and so she disappeared, vanished, so to speak. And Baba, not seeing her, said, "Well, we've got to search and find Kim." And Elizabeth, or not Elizabeth so much as Margaret and Kitty and whoever in that early English group were told to go in different directions and to search for her. Well, I don't remember which one went to this Roman Catholic or probably Episcopalian church, or Church of England, and they found her absolutely in prostrate position in front of a statue of Jesus, in the church. And gave her the message, "Baba's looking for you. He'd like you to come right back." And it's told very humorously in Kitty's book or Mr. Purdham's book, because it's told in a way which brings in the priest who was baffled by this woman's behavior and was so relieved when someone came to pick her up. And, well, another thing, she was very beautiful. She was a very beautiful lady. One other thing about Kim was the fact that she, again, was given orders, was just as the others were, was given certain appointments, dates, relating to the time when Baba would return. And then the order came to her, if you don't come to this particular date at this particular place, you will never see me again. And that is what happened. And when she came to America to study with the Metropolitan Opera teachers, or maybe she had a role, I forget the arrangement, she was a very charming woman, and she really was very nice to me, very nice to Phyllis, and decided to have the meetings in her home, which was in Manhattan. And this was prior to it certainly was prior to one of Baba's subsequent visits. As you know, I met him in 52 and 56 and 58. I don't remember what trip we were anticipating, and we always were anticipating Baba's return. And Kim knew that, and we thought surely the attempt would be made. And whether the attempt was made or not, Baba's statement had to hold true. And we felt very sorry about it, but it was just not made possible for her to see Baba again. And I believe she really suffered.
Life just brought things between her and Baba each time he came to visit, so that she couldn't get away.
Yes, right.
Yeah, that's sad.
Right, very sad.
Yeah.
Although, if you talk to Margaret at least, she's the one that always said that Baba said Kim was part of the circle. So, according to the interpretation of Margaret, Kim was part of the circle.
Right.
She just had to play that role, just like Jean had to play a strange role.
Yeah, exactly.
And they all were very powerful women. It always is baffling, isn't it? It baffles one how even someone like Jean, whom I also knew very well, could write Avatar and then write a book like Soaring Sunwards.
Yeah. Something totally different, you know.
In Soaring Sunwards, she denies following the Avatar. She denies that. And she told me personally when I met her, I don't mind telling this because the finale is so beautiful. Yeah. So in between what happened when Phyllis was giving a talk in somewhere near Escondido, Jean was scheduled to give a talk that day too. And so I approached Jean, whom I knew from New York, and she was very good to me always in New York. She wouldn't see anyone. She always saw me. And of course I was baffled when I saw her because she has a picture of her own master on the wall. Yeah. Not just. And I said, Jean, we're here. Phyllis will be speaking on Meher Baba, and have these books on Meher Baba. You still are Baba disciple or something of that nature. She says, I will always love Baba. Baba, I will always love Baba. And she said that with such feeling. As you know, she was somewhat of a dramatic person and a very beautiful person. And, but I can't accept him as Avatar. That was in I'll tell you just when that was, 1964. And then when I returned to California in 1977, and I was getting oriented to the fact that this time I would probably live here longer, because when I came here in 1963 for the first time as a nurse at the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, I knew it would only be for a relatively short interval. But this time in 1977 when I returned, I knew I would stay longer, and I wanted to search out people like Jean, and when I did, I found her in the convalescent home, Santa Monica, and took a very real family interest in her, as well as a nursing interest, and found that she had really just separated herself from the family, the MeherBaba family. So that began the project that Marguerite and I undertook together, pretty much, of rehabilitating her into the MeherBaba family. And so that was, yes, so many people helped. Patty Thorne was somehow very drawn to her, Leon Mullen very drawn to her. But we were always in the background supporting the places where she would stay, bringing her things. And we were the steady background, and then there were these highlights that would come there. Well, as it was from, as I say, such a kind of bafflement to think anyone like Jean could be, you might say, an apostate. It was just such a fulfillment and catharsis to see her gradually talk about Baba. In fact, when we first met her, she just didn't even talk. Her paralysis had left to the right side of the brain had been affected, the speech center. But the amazing thing was she did talk, and she talked about Baba. And finally, when I wrote to India a couple of times, Meher wrote back, Jean has come back to Baba. Meher was convinced.
Right. And I remember at the very end, Patty said it was just a wonderful blessing to be around her, because she had such great love for Baba.
Oh, yeah, she really...
that was an interesting story. I guess that's Patty's story with Jean.
Yes. It meant a great deal to Patty. It brought something into her life, which was something we ought to hear about sometime.
Yeah, no, that would
be very interesting to know. The same with Liam.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Both of them had something that a relationship with them, which they should tell us more about sometime. Well, and of course, Marguerite came to Baba through her.
Through her, right. No, that's interesting in itself.
Yeah.
But now we're all at that moment. You're getting ready for Baba's return, and now were there a lot of things attached to Baba coming back the next time? Was it where the trip was shortened or changed around and things so you had to make new plans?
Well, during that, of course, then in 52, Baba had given me the certainty that I could just well, he told me that I didn't have to worry anymore about returning to that academic scene, as you know. And when I returned after that, and Norina was no longer anyone that was going to continue with spiritual thought transmission, and so she remained in Myrtle Beach. She did not return to New York. Could you shut that off a minute?
Fine.
That's how I left Myrtle Beach.
That's right, going to nurse your mother.
Yeah.
And then from that period, you were with your mother, and then you went to the school.
No.
Or
that was no. Still, you see, I had one other Baba lover that was very again this wonderful opportunity to be with someone like Mildred Kyle arose.
Mm-hmm.
I did go when I told the story, didn't I, Charlie? Where I was in a circle and Baba said, "What are you thinking?"
Yes.
And then it was my brother who called on the phone and said, "The mother is, in the hospital, and it's time you came back." And when I did, when I returned to my mother, this time in Cleveland, the plan was for her to be in as happy an environment as possible, which she felt was in Florida, where she had initiated some kind of a little rooming house there, and we went to Florida together, and I was to take care of her. There were no treatments or nothing that was planned in terms of her medical care, but just a lot of tender, loving care. And at that time, while we were living in Florida, near Coral Gables, I enrolled in the university just, on a part-time basis. And I placed an ad in the school bulletin inviting anyone who was interested in Western philosophy. And I did get responses, and responses from some very fine people, because they I couldn't just say Meher Baba, because nobody at that time knew who Meher Baba was, but I did say the Bhagavad Gita. Mm-hmm. And people who wanted to study the Bhagavad Gita got in touch with me. And when we began the group, the Bhagavad Gita was introduced, but I said, "Say, have you ever read Meher Baba?" And they were very eager to learn who this was. And by that time, I had met Meher Baba. This was in 1953, and 52, 53. And I was, I just was, just really was at the, what you call that? I mean,
fire. Yeah.
On fire.
Yeah.
And they caught on. I mean, as Baba does say, love is contagious. And they wanted to study Meher Baba, which was very, very gratifying to me. And I had a whole set of discourses which I donated to the philosophy department. And I just was wondering, sometimes I've reflected on the fact that in 1953 and 4, well, 53 really. The latter part of 52 and 53, I was around this area, which is where Irwin Luck lived. And one of the main members of our group was the editor and his wife of the local paper, and they were influential people. And they got very interested in Baba's discourses. So I don't know. I mean, it seems to me that and the philosophy department had a whole set of the discourses. So I don't remember how Irwin I think Irwin heard about Baba through a book in the public library that fell on the head of Edward. Something like that. But anyway, it was all it was interesting that to reflect on how old would those boys have been when I was there in 53.
They would have been in their early teens.
Yes, they would be very young growing up. And others, I mean, people like Ada Schifrin were destined to be Baba lovers, and others, Ann Forbes. So it was all interesting that at that time there was a whole little group. I would say there were at least 10 of us in that reading group, and they just, Baba had touched them in his own, unique way. I had started to study education classes. And in one way or another, it was shown to me that I was not a good teacher on that level, high school level. I realized I was very critical, very critical. Baba doesn't take away the critical sense, even though he tries to. I mean, because those are heavy sanskaras. He does his best to water them down with a lot of love, but I was really kind of critical of something there in the school system. I remember one thing that really that I found just too irreconcilable with my scientific side, which is to some extent a little more sophisticated than were some people. The school had on in every building they had these Coca-Cola machines and junk candies, and I just found that irreconcilable with an institution. Everybody and the teachers and all that, everyone would drink a whole lot of this junky food. And I just went to the dean once, or somebody. Girls would buy, I forget who it was. And I said, here we are in this wonderful land of orange juice. And here with fresh fruit. Isn't it strange that we don't have some machines where you can get a fresh drink? Because the university was rather distant from any nearby local stores. So it was the most practical, logical thing. I got quite a response. Believe it or not, the response was, I think you should talk to the counselor. I believe, you're so critical. And so she sent me to the psychologist because I had made a practical suggestion. Well, I didn't have to go, but that absolutely dropped the subject as if it were a hot potato. At that time, for one reason or another, as I say, the curriculum just didn't leave me thrilled, and I just somehow couldn't apply myself the way I wanted to. So suddenly, on a weekend, my roommate and I went to visit St. Petersburg, which is where Dr. and Mrs. Love lived, and their guest was Velvet Kyle. And And when I came, we had we met some. Mildred was, of course, the one who drew quite a few, not too many in those days, others to follow Baba, like Warren Healy,
right,
and the Loves, and some others. And so we had a very, strong Baba meeting, and some new people. One of them was a lady who was destined to tell Dr. Kenmore about Baba, Rose Garbady. So, in any case, it was decided on that weekend by Mada and Dr. Love that it would be very nice since, oh, wait a minute, it was the weekend after my mother died. That was it.
Yeah.
That I would stay there and take care of Mildred, and if I wanted to. They had a separate home for her, a separate cottage. It was just ideal. So I agreed to that. And thus began, I don't know if you want to continue tonight, thus began the relationship between myself and Mildred Kyle.
This would be interesting. Now, you tell me,
No, that's up to you.
It's just about 10 o'clock. Why don't we go a little bit more
on Mildred?
On Mildred. That might.
Okay.
Well, now we got right to Mildred this time.
Well, I'd like to also take some pictures out for next time. I'll make a note of that.
Okay.
Here.
We'll start with the pictures.
Mildred. No, I meant about Mildred. No, because you could see what she looked like. She met Baba when she was in her 90s.
Oh my goodness.
Just like Ruth White.
Yeah, I remember.
These were, and these were women, both of them, who had belonged to metaphysical, spiritual groups, which really did prepare one to meet the highest master. Yet, in Mildred's case, when she told her theosophy, Shayla's or whatever, that there was now a chance to meet one for whom they really had been preparing, of just an unbelievable small number responded. Very small. And that was true of Mershida Morton, and certainly true of Ruth White. Ruth White's background was interesting too. I know relatively little about it, but I went. This was after my mother died. It was shortly after my mother died that Maud extended that invitation to me. So it was. I said I went back with my roommate, and I ended my dormitory life there with her, and that was the end of my preparation for teaching on a higher. I think I was trying to prepare to teach on a college level, and that just didn't suit me at all. I wound up by being a Montessori teacher, and with Mildred, I was really, my whole nature is, at that time, from the time I heard about Baba, was that of almost, I wouldn't like to say too strong a word, but, very fiery. Very fiery. And I just felt it just had to spread. So I again put an ad in the paper and said that we'd like to have a meeting on the Bhagavad Gita. This was now St. Petersburg. I was going to do the same thing. It wasn't totally with the consent of Mildred, but nothing could stop me. And she said, Adele, you are exhausting me. I remember that so well, or something like that. This dear old 98. But she said that half jokingly. So it was because I was, after all, taking care of her too. I said, well, don't you worry. I'll be making all this tea and all this stuff, because we always were very gracious. We had big teas and all that. And one of the, and so I put an ad in the paper. Here it was no university, but I put the ad in the paper. And out of that ad came a very fine Zoroastrian physician for Dune Birdie. And then he went to India. And Mani mentions him in a letter. He was, well, no, let me see, Dr. Birdie, there were two people. Dr. Birdie did not go to India. He came to Myrtle Beach to meet Meher Baba in '56. There was another man who did go to India, but Birdie came to Myrtle Beach. Rose Garbady came to those meetings. She was part of a group that Dr. Love was very much involved with, and that was much more of a psychic group too. And Mildred and I realized what they were trying to do, but it was Mildred, nevertheless, Mother Kyle, Mrs. Mother Kyle, however I refer to her, was very, very, very wise and, very intelligent, and she never criticized them at all, because Dr. Love and Mata, especially Dr. Love, was convinced that he had physicians on the other side that were helping him, and that he was, and so it was really a very good thing that we had our Baba reading group and discussion group.
Sounds like you were the key to get
Mildred,
get rolling at that time.
Yes, but we, in a way, I think that was meant to be, because especially in St. Petersburg, there are so many of those psychic groups. Amazing number. We used to go to some of the meetings with them, because Mother Kyle was very conciliatory.
Right.
And we'd go to those meetings, and they would manifest this ectoplasm, in front of us. And the first thing I got was a message from my mother, and all that type of thing. Rose Garbady came from that kind of group, but she was very interested in Baba. She said, when I go to New York, there's a Dr. Kenmore there that I've got to tell about this. And that's another story.
Yeah, starts another story.
So when she came to New York, she got in touch with me. I invited her to a meeting at the Winterfelds. We were meeting with Fred and Ella in those years, and John Bass. And she said, I'm going to bring my friend that I told you about. And Dr. Kenmore came with her. The first impression of him was this very erect, he carried himself like a king. And, but very perceptive. Nothing rude about him then. He was very perceptive. I was a very desperate man at that time. Very keen to know some answers. And in one way, and because I was the link with Rose, I also was the link with Harry, and visited him in his office. And I was studying at Queen's College, so my visits sometimes were based also on the fact that he was known as a very good chiropractor, knew the anatomy, would talk about the parts of the body which were afflicted if you were his patients. And I said, Dr. Kenmore, I have to take a test on the muscle system or something. Could you tell me about it? Muscle system. He pulled down a whole slide. Here, look. If he was just,
as if he's looking at it.
yeah, with the pointer. Well, he taught at this College of Chiropractic. Is that right? Is that right? And he'd be a very good teacher.
Yeah.
And so I really valued that man. I had the highest regard for him. And you know, you overlook all these people that are, you know, very timorous. You know, there's, oh, he's so loud and rude. I mean, I just found him extremely dynamic, and when you like someone, you overlook them.
Yeah, and a powerful individual, very strong.
And these were the pre-Anna Rosa days.
Yeah.
We were very good friends.
Yeah.
And he was not, moreover, he was not that brash, because he was learning. He was a very humble learner of Baba.
Yeah.
I read to him hour after hour. Margaret Krask read to him hour after hour. Phyllis, I don't know, Phyllis became one of his patients, and so forth. I was a patient of his too.
Yeah.
And he slowly came into the circle, and then the famous letters I got from Goer, that's separate.